Hey, I've just reached a milestone, 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. I sincerely thank you for your amazing support, and you can look forward to many more videos in the future. Today we're going to build the mounts for the Curvy seat. There's a couple of things I want to make sure of at this stage. One is I want to make sure the angle of the seat is absolutely vertical. So to check that, I put a center line of tape right in the middle of the seat, and I've glued a board to the bottom of the seat that holds it so that line is absolutely vertical. And I also want to set the seat back angle, and I've glued that board on to give me the angle I want. I've put a fixture on my table that I can run the front edge of the seat against, and this holds the seat parallel with the front edge of the table. I'll put a sandbag on the seat to keep it from moving, and now I can begin designing the mount for the seat. I've used chipboard to make a pattern for what the side of the seat mount will look like. So you can see this follows the curve of the seat, and this edge is parallel with the edge of the table, or parallel with the center line of the seat. To join this to the seat, I'm going to have a flange on the top of this, and there will be screws or rivets that go through that flange to hold these parts together. After these two parts are joined, then I can build the inner portion of this to give it even more strength. To start the mount, I'll bend a flange on a flat piece of metal. With the bottom flange formed on this piece of metal, now I can lay out the location of the top flange. So I'll put my paper pattern over the piece of metal, and I'll clamp it into place. I'll put a weight on this to keep it from sliding on my table, and I'll use a felt tip marker to mark the curved line on the top of the part. I want to have a 1/2-inch flange here, so to lay out the top edge to trim, I'll use 1/2-inch masking tape. So now I can trim on the top edge of this tape, and I'll be ready to form the top flange. I've trimmed the panel, and I'm ready to form the flange on the edge of it. I've set a bevel protractor that shows me the angle I need the flange to be, and I put a special set of dies on the bead roller to help me get that flange. On the bottom shaft I have a flat washer that will act as a guide that I ride the edge of the metal against, and I have a urethane wheel on the bottom. This is a little bit soft, and I'm using a 4mm beading die on the top. So I'll do this in several passes. We'll make the first pass at partial depth. Then I'll turn this adjuster screw down a 1/2 turn, make another pass. I'll check the angle. Needs to go just a little bit more, so I'll turn this adjuster screw down another 1/2 turn. And that's just about the perfect angle. So as long as I have this set up, I'm going to make the part for the other side. So that angle looks good. In checking the fit of this part against the seat, I see that a little adjustment is needed. The front of it fits pretty well, but from this point back there starts to be a gap between the seat bracket and the seat itself. It's about a 1/2 inch wide here. So I have a plan for changing the shape of this to make it fit better. First I'm going to mark the place where the adjustment needs to come from. So everything from this point back needs to be bent in a little bit. I'm going to try and do that just by clamping this piece to my bench and pushing on it to give it a little bit of bend. So I'm putting this corner right on the edge of my table. Then I'll clamp this into place and just sort of lean down on this a little bit, giving it a slight bend, and I'll pull it out a little bit more and bend it a little bit more. So my goal is to put a gradual bend in the rear portion of this bracket. So let's test that to see how it's coming. I'll put a weight on this to hold it vertical. And that's helped a lot, but it still needs to go a little bit more. So I'll try the same bending again, starting at this point. We'll test that again. It's definitely getting better. Still needs to go a little bit more in the back. So that's looking pretty good. I think a couple of taps with the rubber mallet will make this even better. So this is starting to fit together very nicely. I think once I get the screws in here to hold the parts together, it will be an excellent fit. I've decided to put some speed holes in this part, and I'll show you how I'll do the layout. First of all, the area in this corner is much larger than anything else, so I'm going to use a larger hole there. I'll use an 1¼ inch hole in this area, and then I'll position 3 holes on the other side equally spaced. So let me show you how I'll do that layout. I'm going to clamp this in a vise to hold it stationary. And the first thing I'll do is to position the largest hole. I'm going to align this so the space here, here, and here is just about equal. Then I'll clamp that into place. I'll lay out the hole farthest from that. And again, I want the space here, here, and here to be equal. So I'll just eyeball that and clamp this into place. And then these 2 holes that go in the center, I want the space between the holes to be equal. So I'll just kind of eyeball that, and I'll use a pair of dividers to check the spacing. That looks pretty good. And the last thing is I want to get the spacing here and here the same on both holes. Clamp that into place. That looks really good. So now I'll center punch the center of each of these holes. I'm going to use an annular cutter to make a 1/2 inch hole in preparation for using the punch and flare dies. And this has a pilot on it that's an 1/8 inch in diameter. On a drill press, the center punch mark is enough to center this. But when I'm hand drilling it, I need to have a little stronger engagement. So I'm going to drill a pilot hole a little bit smaller than this pilot. So this is about a 100,000ths drill. So that will center the annular cutter very well. And because these holes are smaller than the pilot on the annular cutter, the spring in this will punch the slug out when I'm finished. So now I can use the punch and flare dies to make these holes. These punch and flare dies can be used by tightening a center draw bolt, but it's more convenient to use a press. So there's our finished hole pattern. I think it looks great. I've decided to use screws instead of rivets to hold these brackets to the seat so they can be easily removed. And if I use button head stainless screws, they'll have very much the same look as a rivet from the inside. And I want the outside to have a clean appearance too. So instead of using a hex nut, I'm going to use these self-clenching inserts. The size is 832, and these inserts will go right in the center of the flange here. So I need to lay out the center line for all these screws. I plan to use 6 screws. So I've set a compass with a ballpoint pen to make a mark right in the center of this flange. And the first screws will be a 1/2 inch in from each edge. So I'll use a pair of dividers to break this into 5 equal spaces for the 6 screws. I'll open that up just a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'll start marking off these increments. And I'll use a center punch to mark the center of each hole. And I don't have a punch the right size for these inserts. They take a very special size hole. It's 213 thousandths, or the same as a number 3 drill, and I don't have a punch that size. So I'll punch it a little bit undersize and then drill it to the final size. So this is a number 3 drill bit. And now we'll get set up to press the self-clenching nuts into place. I'd like to keep this protective plastic film on the metal as long as possible, but we have to take it off now so the nuts can seat fully. So I'll peel this back. And we can seat the nuts. Now these nuts have to be pressed into place with a good deal of force. You can't hammer them into place. So I'm going to use a small vise to create the pressure. So we just put the self-clenching fastener in the hole, make sure it's centered, and just crank the vise down until I can see that the nut has seated fully. Doesn't take a whole lot of pressure. We'll put the next nut into place. Put it in the vise. Squeeze it with the vise. So all the nuts have been pressed into place, and now I can fit this to the seat. Now I'll match drill the holes in the seat for the screws. I'm using a transfer punch that's a nice fit inside these nuts. I'll just tap this with a hammer. I'm going to drill a hole right there. So first I want to reinforce that center punch mark, make it a little bit larger. Then I'm going to drill that with a very small drill. Then I'll open that up for the clearance drill for the screw. I'll deburr this hole. Then I'll put this back into place, weight it down, and I'll put the first screw into place. I'll get everything squared up. Now I can mark the centers of the 2 adjacent holes. I'll pull this apart. I'm going to make those marks a little bit deeper. I'll use the pilot drill. And the clearance drill. Deburr the holes. I'll put the bracket back into place, weight it down, and get the screws put into place. Now I can mark the next 2 holes. So the parts are fitting together beautifully. The next thing I'll do is to make and attach the mount for the other side of the seat. I finished mounting the seat brackets on both sides. Now I want to put some threaded inserts on the bottom flange for mounting the seat. I'm using a piece of 1/4 by 1 aluminum bar for this. I put 2 1/4-20 tapped holes in the bar for the mounting bolts and 6 4/40 tapped holes to secure this bar to the flange. I made these bars longer than necessary, and you'll see why shortly. I removed the brackets from the seat to make it easier to attach the aluminum bars. I've centered the aluminum bar on the bracket and clamped it in place, and I'll use transfer punches to find the centers for each of these holes. I'll punch as many holes as I can. I'll start with the 1/4 inch holes. And now I'll punch the holes for the number 4 screws. My punch can't get close enough to this hole because of the flange, so I'll have to drill that one. So I'm going to make that center punch mark a little bit larger. And then I'll drill through. The number 4 screws will be flathead, so I need to countersink these holes. And I'll be using an adjustable stop countersink. So this has a sleeve that surrounds the countersink itself, and it limits how deeply it can go into the panel. So I've preset this so it fits perfectly with the number 4 screw. So now I can screw these parts together. So as you can see, that does a great job. I put both of the mounting brackets on the seat, and we don't need the wood anymore, so I've removed it. These brackets are pretty flexible right now, so to remedy that, I've made a couple of cross braces, and these will hold the brackets rigid while we build the inner part of it. So the reason I left these aluminum bars long is so I'd have a place to attach these reinforcement pieces. Get those snugged up. So the brackets are rigidly mounted now, and these braces keep it from being able to move sideways. So now I can go about building the inner structure. I want to have this next piece at about a 45-degree angle. So to help me get that angle, I've made a little piece of metal that I can rest the pattern against. So I'll use a couple of screws in here to hold this to the bracket. So this angled surface will support the pattern as I slide it into place to capture the contour it needs at the seat. So I've already made a pattern out of chipboard, and you can see this captures the contour very nicely. So I'll transfer this onto a sheet of aluminum. I'll have to add a 1/2 inch for the mounting flange, and we can start shaping the first inner piece of the bracket. I've cut the metal blank out, and I'm ready to start forming the flange. I'll use the beading machine again to start the process, but I'll need to use a hammer form to finish it. I measured the angle I need on this, and it's about 80 degrees, and I can't get that with the beading machine alone. But I like the soft way this starts the bend. So let's make the first pass with this. So far so good. I'm going to give this a little more pressure and give it a second pass. That's done a great job so far, but I need quite a bit more angle, so I'll switch to a hammer form to complete the process. I've made a hammer form to finish the flange. Basically, it's just two flat pieces of wood, and they've been cut in such a way that it follows the contour of the flange I started on the beading machine. So these pieces sandwich the aluminum and keep it flat. I have alignment pins put through all the pieces, so I'll assemble this and get ready to do the hammer forming. I'll use a mallet with a low crown face to do the forming. I've set this bevel protractor to show me the angle I need. I think that looks pretty good. So let's disassemble this now. Notice how this has preserved the flatness of the part. And now I'll try this into place on the seat. So I've done a little adjusting on this flange, and I think I have it fitting just about perfectly now. So you can see there's a nice tight fit on this edge. And I want to emphasize how essential this support surface is. Without this, I would have a very difficult time not only fitting this side, but also making the other side match. So I like the fit we have against the seat, and it's time to start laying out the holes for the screws that will hold it together. So I've put tape on here that shows where the end of this panel will be. I want these ends to be in line with the ends on the outer part. So I'm going to make a mark on my panel to show where the end will be. And then I want to have the first screw a 1/2 inch in from the end. So I'll measure that on both sides. And then I'll use 6 screws on this length. So I need to lay out 5 divisions with dividers. That looks just about perfect. So I'll do the punching of the holes and the inserting of the clench nuts off camera, since you've already seen that. I've installed all the self-clenching nuts, so now I can match drill the seat for each of the screws. I'll get this clamped into place, get my transfer punch positioned, mark the first hole, and now I'll drill that through. So now I can put the screw in this first hole, then I'll match drill all the others. So the inner part of the seat brace is held in place with its screws now, and the next step is I need to trim off the extra material. So I'll just get into this area with the scriber and scribe the line that we'll trim on. So now I can trim on this line. After trimming, the fit looks really good. So there's one more thing I want to do before I weld these together. I want to trim these ends to the proper length. So I'll mark those. And now I'll trim on the lines. I'm ready to tack weld these together now. So this is ready to finish weld now. I'll let this cool down and I'll sand it smooth. I'll cut the weld down flush with 80 grit. Then I'll smooth the 80 grit scratches out with 120 grit. Okay, that looks really good for now. This side's come along great so far. I'm going to change my focus now to the other side and bring it up to the same point. After completing the welds on both sides, I pulled these brackets off the seat so I could do a better job of finishing the weld. And on this part you can see I've cut this threaded plate back so it's flush. I'll do that next on this part. Then I can put both these brackets back on the seat and I'll be ready to make the last part, which is a cap for the rear end of each bracket. I'll use chipboard to make a pattern for the end caps. So I'll just lay this up into place and use a pencil, and the pencil will draw a line that represents the curve of the seat. So I'll trim on that line. I'll check the fit. The fit looks excellent. So now I'll mark the back side of this. And I'll trim on the line. There's our pattern. So now I'll cut out two parts. I have both end caps fitted, and now I'll tack weld them into place. So the tack welds are completed. Now I can finish weld these joints and then sand everything smooth. It was actually a tricky job to get these seat brackets to fit just so, but I'm delighted with how well this job came out. There's a couple more things I want to do to finish this seat. I'm going to put a reinforced border around the edge, and I'm going to put an interesting pattern of holes in the center. So I look forward to seeing you next time. I love making these videos, and I'm honored that you're watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified about new videos. I read every comment, and I do my best to answer all questions. If you like what I'm doing, please click the Patreon link and become one of the great people who help me create new videos.